governor's budget plan gets a legislative review. Republicans can claim a legal victory in the voter ID battle, and Democrats call for a repeal of House Bill 2. We'll analyze the issue. Hi there, I'm Kelly McCullen. The short legislative session is underway, and one of its first items of business, Governor Pat McCrory's budget plan. Governor Pat McCrory revealed his full budget to lawmakers this week. He says his plan would boost the average teacher's salary throughout North Carolina to over $50,000 a year. That's if you count local pay supplements that boost state salaries. Highway patrol officers and corrections officials would receive permanent pay increases, and many other state workers would receive a one-time bonus of 3% of one's salary up to a maximum $3,000.
We certainly agree with the governor that there are classes of positions that are so far behind the market they need to be addressed, but at the same time there have been so little in terms of raises over the last several years that we also need to look at those increases for all state employees.
Republicans and Democrats were asking about public education, including teacher assistant funding, the conversion from textbooks to computer tablets, and how to help struggling or rural public school systems.
We compensate teachers to some degree, not enough. Nothing about teacher assistants. And we know that there are a lot of ingredients go into making a school's performance get up. You got to have the support in the classroom for those kids in addition to the teachers. So what happens to teacher assistants? You know, what happens to the other things that school systems need?
While many lawmaker questions surrounded those pay increases, one-time pay bonuses, and the lack of any proposed raise for state retirees, the budget lays the groundwork to launch the Connect NC bond plan, which voters approved overwhelmingly this spring.
We're so thankful for the support that the citizens gave us with the bond plan. We think that this is going to move the state forward. The budget reflects the necessary positions to enact the bond and do it responsibly, efficiently, and effectively like we promised the voters.
Lurking in any recent state budget negotiation in recent years, at least, has been how Medicaid expenses could ripple across the state operations budget. So far, Medicaid expenses are meeting expectations, say Senate leaders.
We've seen a year where our costs have actually declined for what recipients are spending, and we also saw fewer people enroll in the system than we had projected. Still a little nervous as to how much that's holding. Once we've crossed into the new calendar year, we've seen some uptick in enrollment that's coming in that eroded some of that decline we'd seen earlier in the fiscal year.
Step one of the budget process is now in the books. The governor released his budget. Lawmakers have reviewed it. But the next budget changes and next moves will come from the legislature on Jones Street. A federal judge upheld North Carolina's voter ID law this week. Judge Thomas Schroeder issued a near 500-page ruling that dismisses claims made against the 2013 election reform law, which requires voters to show a photo identification to vote or vote a provisional ballot if they don't. It reduced the number of early voting days and ended same-day registration. Expect voter ID opponents to appeal this ruling. Some expect the case to possibly reach the U.S. Supreme Court. House Elections Committee Chairman Representative David Lewis of Harnett County joins us. The ruling this time goes your way for voter ID in North Carolina. What does it mean?
I'm very pleased that the federal judge was able to take a look at the common sense voter ID and other election reforms that we proposed and find that they did exactly what we said they would do, which is we wanted every person to be able to cast their vote and to fully participate in the election process. The judge looked at all the claims to the contrary, most especially the claim that said that less people would vote, and said numerically you're wrong on that, and we're very pleased that the judge found in our favor.
How does North Carolina's voter identification law square with other states? Which states, if there are laws similar to it?
Oh, we are very much in line with most of the other states that require some kind of an ID to be shown. In fact, our entire election process is very much mainstream with what other states do. You know, we have 10 days of early voting. We have a lot of hours that people can show up and vote, non-traditional voting time. But I guess the real crux of this case came back down to the voter ID. And it's just a common sense measure. You can show your ID and cast your vote, and the judge recognized that that was not an impairment or a tactic to prevent folks from voting.
Do you understand the other side of this debate after what happened in the 50s, the 60s as civil rights, that movement moved through America and still moves? Do you understand why folks would be fearful of any changes to voter identification laws or the implementation of them just based on past U.S. history?
Well, let me be clear. I am deeply sensitive and deeply appreciative to all of the civil rights pioneers who have withstood things, barriers to their participation, and have overcome that. And we are better off as a society to benefit from their sacrifice. This is not a civil rights issue to me at all. This is, again, a common sense issue where folks are truly able to produce a photo ID to attest that they are who they say they are, and then to exercise their right to vote. I have listened to those on the other side of the issue, and to be frank with you, I think it's simply just that. I think that they are going to be contrary and opposed to any and every policy change that we try to make as Republicans in the General Assembly. And this was the complaint du jour, and they have continued to maintain it. But we have continued to maintain that we want everyone to vote, and the election results seem to be bearing out that actually a higher percentage of people are now participating in the election. So it certainly doesn't seem like it's had the effect of reducing the number of folks that vote.
If you voted in the primary, you showed your ID this cycle.
Yes.
And if you voted, you showed your ID and they asked you where you lived, and sometimes you had to repeat yourself. Did the process go as smoothly as you wanted by and large across the state, or did local precinct workers, do they have some work to do to learn the system?
I think by and large the process went very smoothly. I think it makes sense to people to be able to show their ID and to prove who they are, and then to cast their vote. I think that enough time now has passed. We're going to visit with the State Board of Elections and do our role as the oversight committee and say, hey, did things go as we thought they did? But by all intents and purposes, more people participated, and that seems to be a good thing.
Is this debate settled in North Carolina right now? Do you want to hear any more debate on the topic, or after the primary 2016, was the law proven to be effective?
Well, I think those are two different questions. I think the primary of 2016 and the election of 2014 prove that these voter integrity improvements in no way prevent people from taking part in the chance to vote. But I'd be naive, as would anybody listening to this show, if I thought that those that can't win at the ballot box would not continue to sue on not just this, but nearly every other Republican initiative that we have. We spend an enormous amount of time in court. I'm heartened by this judge's ruling, but I'd be foolish to think that those that are opposed to the reforms that the Republicans are trying to bring about will not continue to sue and sue and sue until hopefully they can prevail in court or be told by the U.S. Supreme Court that it's finally over.
Representative David Lewis, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Some House Democrats are calling for a full repeal of all provisions found in what's called House Bill 2. This week, Wake County Representative Greer Martin joined members of the faith community. There has been no hotter topic in North Carolina than the new law commonly called House Bill 2. Democrats have kicked off the short legislative session calling for its full repeal, and Wake County Representative Greer Martin joined with Jewish leaders this week.
It's a deep honor to help join my Presbyterian Christian voice to the voices of Jews from around North Carolina, doing the exact same thing that the Jews that I knew growing up in Charlotte are doing, and calling for justice in our state. It is my understanding that just about every rabbi in the state of North Carolina is signing a letter calling for the full repeal of House Bill 2.
House Bill 2 passed the General Assembly and was signed by Governor Pat McCrory a few weeks ago in response to a now nullified Charlotte City Ordinance. The city passed that ordinance to offer local protections for transgendered citizens to allow them to use restroom facilities reflective of their gender identity.
Throughout history, Jews have been the victims of discrimination, and we cannot remain silent today. This bill threatens our entire community, a religious minority, by removing the right to sue in state court if we experience discrimination on the basis of religion. But it goes much farther, prohibiting protections for workers, for the LGBTQ community, and for transgender people.
Republican leaders offered some differing opinions on whether House Bill 2 could be legislatively addressed in this short session. Senate leadership says there's no expectation of repealing this law. House leaders have said certain provisions of House Bill 2, mainly a provision forcing anti-discrimination lawsuits into the federal, not state court system, might merit some debate. Tammy Fitzgerald leads the North Carolina Values Coalition, and you're a supporter of House Bill 2. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, there's no shortage of editorials out there regarding HB 2. How should North Carolinians perceive this piece of legislation, which is now law?
Well, House Bill 2 just restores common sense to the state of North Carolina because it requires that men use the men's restroom and locker room and women use the women's restroom and locker room. It protects the safety and privacy of all of our citizens as well as businesses.
What would the Charlotte Ordinance have done, and how could it have affected other towns outside of Charlotte since the state came in and overrode the ordinance to nullify it?
Well, the way the Charlotte Ordinance was written, it basically prohibited sex-specific bathrooms. So if you maintained a business or a public accommodation, which is any place open to the public, you could no longer maintain a women's bathroom and a men's bathroom because it was written in a fashion that took out an exception for bathrooms and locker rooms and showers. But beyond that, the Charlotte Ordinance would have impacted businesses who contract with the city of Charlotte, requiring them to adopt internal HR policies favoring the LGBT community. And really it was an overreach by government, a local government, into the business community, not just around the state, but around the country. And so any business that contracted with the city was impacted by the ordinance, but as well as their bathrooms. Their bathrooms were impacted too.
The branding has always been about the bathroom bill, and the perception is the dirty old man will use the law to go into the girl's bathroom and peek or do whatever it is you do. And that's the way I perceive this at its most, I guess, most descriptive. Is that accurate? What would have happened in Charlotte had they gone to gender-neutral bathrooms? Would it have been the Wild West in that term?
Well, we have examples from around the country where we have these laws in place where that's happened. Just last month in the state of Washington, a man entered the shower room at a public bathroom facility and began to undress while he was watching young girls on a swim team undress and go to the showers. And when he was approached, he said that he had the right to be there. The law in Washington had changed. We had this happen just last week or the week before in just outside of Washington, D.C. at the Potomac Mills Mall, where a man stuck a camera up under a bathroom stall. So voyeurism is a topic that they don't like to talk about on the other side, but it is happening. There's a video on the web that shows hundreds of cases where men have dressed as women just for the purpose of going into a woman's bathroom or locker room where they harm them, sexual assault, even murder in some cases.
Those people are criminals, and they're using the law to break another law. What about folks out there who genuinely identify, they may have been born a male, but they identify as a female and vice versa? What's the socially conservative argument to accommodating them?
Well, you know, it's hard to create a law where the enforcement is based on feelings and not facts. And that's what the Charlotte Ordinance did. Now, what House Bill 2 does is accommodate those people by allowing private businesses around the state to provide a third option, a bathroom that is a single stall facility made just for people who don't feel comfortable in a multi-stall bathroom. And that is a reasonable accommodation, and that's what House Bill 2 does.
So you're talking about a bathroom. I see these bathrooms called family bathroom. A
Yes.
man or a woman can use it, but lock the door behind you or someone will walk in on you.
Right.
That's what this is. That's what you're saying this is about.
That's free. The business owners are free under House Bill 2 to create that type of situation. What House Bill 2 did was protect the freedom of business owners not to be forced to allow men into the women's bathroom and women into the men's bathroom. This, by the way, created liability on the part of the business owner, but not the city of Charlotte.
Well, Ms. Fitzgerald, thanks so much for sharing your time a few minutes with us to discuss your side of the issue. It's a hot issue. I'm sure we'll be seeing it again this legislative session.
Well, thank you. It's just about common sense, really.
Public policy polling released data this week on the voter opinion of House Bill 2. Just over 60% of Democratic voters polled oppose HB 2. 46% of independents oppose it. Republicans who were polled supported House Bill 2 with a 56% approval rating. All told, and overall, 32% of all people polled say House Bill 2 helps North Carolina. 53% believe it hurts the state's image. There are 15% of us out there who aren't sure if it's affecting our image at all. Duke University's Mac McCorkle is here to discuss HB 2. Mac, I feel like people are told they're bad people if they support HB 2 and they're bad people if they oppose HB 2. How did this bill get so hot?
Well, it hits on the social issue front, which is hot in North Carolina. It's been hot since Jesse Helms and before Jesse Helms, and probably will remain that way. But it also is an issue that the interesting thing politically is there's nowhere to hide on this. You're either for it or you're against it, and there's no kind of middle ground on it at all. It also reflects what political science call the polarization that's going on in the electorate. You're either liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat, and that's kind of where there are only two choices these days, it seems to be.
How deeply are the heels dug in on this issue on both sides? The city of Charlotte and all those supporters who say this bill makes sense, it's progressive. The conservatives in Raleigh who by veto-proof majorities passed this bill and said no changes to speak of, maybe some tweaks here and there.
Obviously, both sides are incredibly dug in, especially on the liberal and conservative extremes. The problem for Governor McCrory, though, is for those few people who are not dug in, the impression that the bill is leaving, and I mean the impression, not the specifics of it. The impression is that it's bad for North Carolina, and that's why you're seeing it move in the polls from even support for the bill at first to opposition. There's just a sense that so much was laid on in this bill that was extraneous to the issue going on in Charlotte. Lots of issues about discrimination going around, that it's become a net negative for the Republicans and Governor McCrory, regardless of the particular issue that it started out to be. It's grown into a larger issue about North Carolina's image and reputation.
As someone who studies government policy strategy, how deeply do North Carolinians or Americans look into a piece of state legislation and pick it apart? Because this bill is branded as the bathroom bill, but it's got 3 or 4 distinct parts. Any number of them are worthy of a heavy policy debate.
Right. It's the bathroom bill plus. I think that what happened here, and probably Governor McCrory wished it hadn't happened, is that it got beyond the bathroom bill. The attacks on local government's prerogatives. People don't know the specifics, but they know that, I think enough people know, wow, local government, state government just said local government can't do anything right now. That really limited what local government could do in the area of employment, in the area of discrimination. And in a special session, doing that without any, I think people also have a sense this was rushed up. And people, without knowing specifics, when they hear a bill has been rushed through the legislature, that usually means something is wrong with it in people's impressions.
Charlotte city leaders, you can't speak for them, but they chose to forward a bill that would fundamentally change some city statutes and ripple across this country as it's turned out. They did it during a presidential election year. I don't believe anything in politics is an accident. So it rolls out and we call a special session. What does it mean that it's 2016 when this is happening, when it could have happened in 2017 or 18?
Sure. Oh, the national focus is so much brighter, as you can see. I mean, President Obama is talking about this bill in London. So, but I think what the Charlotte politics was that it really came out of the 2015 mayoral race and started to move. The one thing I say to people is that the interesting thing is how progressive, how far the Charlotte Ordinance went. I mean, in Houston, this couldn't pass a referendum, might not even pass a referendum in Charlotte before all this controversy. But this was quite a big step for the Charlotte City Council to take, and one that doesn't reflect what's going on in the rest of the South. So it was it's very North Carolina for Charlotte to have done this, and now to be this reaction in the legislature. It just shows what a divided state we are.
The power of branding this piece of legislation and what it means. Does branding make the difference when you look at a poll and some polls say this group of people oppose it greatly and another poll says, well, this group of social conservatives really support HB 2? Is it branding?
Well, it is branding in this case, in this respect. Sometimes issues are just issues, and sometimes it's just about the bathroom privacy, is what the Republicans want to say. It grew way beyond that, and it's a reflection now. The problem for Governor McCrory is really it's a reflection on his leadership. The Carolina comeback. His whole story was about how we're going to get more jobs in here and bring all these businesses in, and pro-NBA and pro-NCAA. And now all of that seems to crash with the reality of what's going on in HB 2. I don't know that it matters so much for the legislature. I think it matters, though, that it's a presidential year and a gubernatorial year where Governor McCrory is already in a tight race. That doesn't mean that he's not going to get support. He does have support for this. There is strong support for his position. It's just that there's equally strong support against it. And then again, when you have businesses saying we don't want to do business with North Carolina, it's just a bad message for somebody whose campaign message theme is the Carolina comeback.
Well, everyone's targeting the governor. There's a big gubernatorial race going on. The governor's down 5-6 points. Last poll I saw. This bill,
Maybe,
whether or not, who knows with any given day. However, you look at the vote totals, they were veto proof. Even if the governor puts his signature on it, or he vetoes this bill 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, and he punts it back here, I've seen a veto get overridden here.
Oh, it probably would have been overridden. Yeah. And I'm sure that was part of the governor's calculation. He's in a hard spot. It's a very tough spot. But in retrospect, it probably would have been a stronger move for him to have vetoed and maybe tried to get into the short session and got a bit of a different bill. But I grant you that he probably would have been veto-proof. I mean, or that his veto would have been overridden.
Let's talk about this policy, the bathroom bill. Can you craft a state law that respects transgendered people, if that's the aim of the city ordinance, and lets them feel most secure and safe, while keeping out those people who would use this law to exploit, in this case, young women or females? I've not heard if the law could be changed to protect a class while keeping out other people who would abuse it, I should say.
I think the problem is that the legislation assumed that you could establish these hardened categories that determined completely by your anatomy or by your birth certificate. And that probably was a faulty assumption. We're going to be experiencing these kind of issues going forward, and I don't have all the answers, but I think that probably the bill is just so inflexibly written that that's the real problem with it. And I think that's what people sense about it. Even if they're discomforted with the liberal position, the conservative position simply seems too inflexible and not in keeping with the reality, especially because one of the issues is a lot of people have pointed out, there are no enforcement provisions to this bill. So what does it really mean to say that here is how you have to go to the bathroom if there's no enforcement behind it?
Yeah, I've never thought about bathroom law. I don't think, are there current bathroom ordinances? So if you walked in a women's restroom and you were proudly Mac McCorkle, would you get in trouble? What happens?
It's complicated, and I'm not a total expert, but apparently there was some kind of Charlotte ordinance that the city council eliminated that did kind of establish that the law about that. But again, there are no enforcement provisions, and both sides can think of parade of horribles here when you're dealing, the story about we need to protect women and children. Well, you can think of horribles on both sides that probably have very little touch with reality. Again, though, I do think that if this had just been a bathroom bill, if they had just gone into session and said that Charlotte ordinance, it's eliminated, it's no longer effective, I don't know that we would have had as much national furor. But when you add all of the other elements, again, that people don't necessarily know about, but that got written about, then people started to suspect, again, doing it in the special session too, that something was wrong.
Anti-discrimination lawsuits. The living wage, you can't raise the minimum wage higher than a
local
certain-
governments are really handcuffed. You know, politically, when you see that, you have to say, wow, the people who are trying to, you can't handcuff local government that much. So again, I think people's common sense said this seemed like a desperation move. And there are a lot of conservative people who said, well, I don't agree with what the Charlotte City Council did, but let's throw them out. Let democracy work in a local way rather than trying to. It's ironic that we're centralizing all these things in Raleigh now.
Could arguing over House Bill 2 affect any other state issues or distract them from, say, teacher pay raises or the budget debate or anything, or do you see it being simply isolated and we'll let the protesters on both sides step forward and support HB 2?
Obviously that's what I think Governor McCrory and a number of people hope. There's going to be some spillover effect, but I think that the main problem politically is for the Republicans and especially for Governor McCrory. They have had a positive message about the Carolina comeback, and this just seems to collide with that. I don't know that it's deadly, but it certainly presents a problem that they're going to have to deal with. Something is out there that's saying their message is not correct, and that's a tough one for an incumbent governor in a tough race to deal with.
Mac, we'll stop right there. Mac McCorkle, Duke University, thank you so much for being on Legislative Week in Review.
Yep.
Find us online by searching North Carolina Channel on Facebook or tweet us at NC Channel as our handle. That's all for this week. We'll see you next week and online. North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC-TV network.